Hello and welcome to Fertility Talks, the Therapy Fertility podcast. I'm your host, Ranae von Meding. Today's podcast might be a little bit different to what you're used to. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking to Sarah, one of our Therapy Fertility patients who is still in the middle of her IVF journey. This chat is going to be a bit different from what probably our viewers and listeners are used to. When we're chatting to people, we're talking to people who are kind of at the end of their journey, and that's not the case for you.
At that stage, we were 2 years trying. It was my first time I got positive. Came in and had my early scan here, and they said there was no heartbeat.
And so many people go through years and years of this and have that in their head and have that mentality of, you can beat me down and I'm just going to get back up and I'm going to keep going, and you're battered and bruised and you don't have the time or the space to heal any of that.
That was really, really hard that day, especially because that's what was in my head. I was like, oh, I thought there was going to be Mother's Day, and like, what am I now?
Thank you so much for coming in, Sarah.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
This chat is going to be a bit different from what probably our viewers and listeners are used to. Because normally when we're chatting to people, we're talking to people who are kind of at the end of their journey, so to speak. And that's not the case for you. And I think that this conversation is going to be really important to have. And I so appreciate you coming in.
No problem.
So do you want to maybe just tell me a bit about yourself and how you came to find yourself at Therapy Fertility?
Yeah, so, well, the journey kind of started back in 2019 now. Yeah. Myself and my husband had just bought our house, and we decided that we were going to start trying for children. I was pretty chilled about it. Like, we were young enough at the time. I think we were like 27 or something. So, yeah, the usual thing where I just thought, oh yeah, I'll just go off contraception and we'll see what happens. And I was pretty chill about it at the start because, yeah, I suppose like that we were just in our new house and we thought, we'll see how things go. I was probably about 6 months in when I kind of went, actually, it has been a little bit of time, and that's when it kind of twigged with me. We were just going into lockdown at that stage as well. So it was probably then, once I kind of stopped working and things, that I suddenly went, actually, it's been a little bit of time. Maybe maybe we should be a little bit more proactive, be a bit more conscious of timing and things like that. Did the usual thing, got the ovulation kits and things like that, which I know some people swear by, but for some reason it was like I never ovulated, which really panicked me. They never went positive. Yeah. And I remember when I started doing them, I didn't tell him I started doing them. I was like, he's got to think I'm a crazy person. So I was like, I don't want to go full crazy just yet. So when I was doing them and they weren't going positive, I was like, okay. And then I started Googling. That's where it started to creep in. Maybe something's not right. Continued anyway for another few months. But yeah, once it got to just before the year, we had talked about it a little bit, but I just said, I feel like something should have happened, isn't this how it works? So I broached the subject. I would be the most patient person. So I kind of said, you know what, why don't I just reach out? What would be the next steps? I had already done a little bit of Googling and kind of realized, okay, initial tests aren't that scary. There some blood tests, I was like, I can deal with that. That's not a big deal. Possible semen analysis. So we chatted about it, and I reached out to I went straight for a clinic. I didn't go GP, of course. I was like, straight, no, let's go, get to the source. So yeah, we went and had our first consultation. It was just on the year, and I knew I was young as well. So and
what age were you at that time?
At that stage, yeah, I was 28. Okay. Yeah. So in my head, I was like, oh, they're going to just tell me to go away because I'm young. Yeah, basically. Don't be so impatient. But no, they didn't. They were more than happy to see me come in. So I had the initial consultation. And that's the first time I met Dr. John as well. So loved him. Not my initial consultation. He was so good.
And that was in his previous clinic?
Yeah, in the previous clinic. Yeah. So it was... Yeah, I had my consultation with him. They came back, everything was normal. So that's what I was told. Everything was normal. Semen analysis was normal. All my levels were normal. AMH was really good for my age. So at that stage, we broached the subject of possibility of IUI, but you know what? If you want to give it a couple months, see how you feel. So that was okay for a few months. I kind of went, you know what? I've checked and I know there's nothing wrong. I had a cyst as well. Okay. So at that stage too. So I was like, okay, there's nothing wrong as such. So we'll see how we go. Gave it another couple of months. Nothing happened. So I said, you know what? Let's go for it. Let's try IUI. At that stage, Dr. John had moved on. So I had another doctor. Yeah, it was. So I, jumped into IUI. Ended up doing 4 rounds of that. The first 2 were cancelled. So that was really tough. First was like underacting, then overactive. Or responding, I should say. And then we did 2 full rounds of IUI and nothing. So that was like another 6 months down the line. I'm hitting it 1.5 years now, and I just thought, okay, now's the time to talk about IVF. So we had that conversation. I think because I was in it, I knew it was a huge deal, but I was on that train, and I was like, yeah, let's just go for it. I
know you kind of get the blinkers, and you're like, just gotta get this done. You know?
So I don't think I thought about it as much as I probably should have. I was just like, yeah, IVF, brilliant. Isn't that what you do to have a baby if you can't have one naturally? So I had that conversation then, and we were just about to get ready to head into around doing the IVF, and I read about therapy opening, and it was Dr. John. So I was like, hold on a minute. I was like, I want to switch. So we made the switch. Straight away, I got straight on therapy, like right after they opened, and I was like, I want to come here. So that was, I said the start of August 2021 at that stage. So we were over a year into treatments with him. Met Dr. John again, showed him everything we'd gone through. We said, we'll go for IVF. So we did. I remember arriving and I was like, I'm on this day of my cycle, so can I start my meds? And it was like 4 days after meeting him. Straight in again. Non-stop. Straight in, had a retrieval. It went okay. I think I had got 18 eggs that time. 9 matured. We ended up, though, just with 2 embryos. So I was a bit disappointed. It was a bit lower than we were expecting, but I was like, okay, you've got 2 embryos. So I did a fresh transfer. I was able to do a fresh transfer, which was great, and was unsuccessful. So that was in the October of 21. And then I did a frozen transfer straight away again, of course, in November 21. And that time I got pregnant. So, that was, I couldn't believe it. It was my first, I think at that stage, we were 2 years trying. And it was my first time I got positive. It was amazing. I remember Dr. John calling me. He called me himself.
Yeah, and he doesn't usually do that for everyone.
He called me himself, and I remember him saying that. He was just like, he said, I had to call you when I saw it. And because that stage, we've been in this together now for so long. He was I had to call you myself. So that was great. I had tested the day before the blood test, like you're not supposed to, but I did.
Look,
so, so I had the positive the day before, so I kind of had the idea. It went positive straight away, so I had the positive bloods. Because we were at the end of November around then, my first scan then was due the first week of January, just because of Christmas and that. I had lots of symptoms. I was sick. I was living on dry crackers. Many things. And I actually got COVID over Christmas and New Year. And then had the panic stations. Had the teary call to whoever, poor nurse who got me here. We had to push my scan. So by the time I came in for my early scan, I was actually closer to, I was nearly 10 weeks.
Okay.
I was supposed to be 10 weeks. I came in and had my early scan here, and they said there was no heartbeat. So it was such a shock. And now that I look on it, it seems so silly that it was a shock, but I was so surprised. I think the whole time I was on that train, I was like, I just have to get pregnant. And then I kind of thought, oh, I'm pregnant now.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. You know, this is where I needed to get to. And it seems like that. It was like this, you know, it just felt like the goalpost had jumped so far away. So yeah, and I also, despite all my reading, I didn't know the term missed miscarriage or silent miscarriage. I think that was the biggest surprise for me, because I had all the symptoms. And I think, well, the one thing was like going through IVF, taking so long to get pregnant in the first place. Obviously I was very anxious, and you look out for all the signs. Like when you wake up in the morning, just pause for a minute and be like, yeah, no, I still feel awful. Yep, it's still there.
My boobs
So
sore.
yeah, that's it. I was literally like, okay, boobs sore, and I feel not,
Sick.
yeah. So I'm like, okay. And it was such a comfort to me. The symptoms were such a comfort. And in my head, I remember the nurse saying it to me here when they said there was no heartbeat, and I'm pretty sure I straight away was like, but I wasn't bleeding. And I just associated.
How could something have gone wrong? I still feel pregnant. I am not bleeding. I don't have pain in my tummy.
Nothing. There was nothing to show that. And it was just unfortunate because I was kind of a little bit later. I had actually, my family have known the whole journey the whole time, and my closest friends have known the whole time. I've been very open. Mainly because I learned so much from the whole journey. That I was very open with everyone, because I was like, everyone should know these things. Do you know it's not as easy as you think it is, or how they tell you in school. So yeah, but a wider friends that we had just told some people recent, like, I know it's still a bit early, but I had told people they're at that stage, so that was really hard. There was people knew we were having the scan and stuff. So yeah, then it has to be confirmed. So we went to the Rotunda, which isn't a fun place to go during that stage. We had to go to the early pregnancy unit. So yeah, I kind of pushed a little bit for surgical management. I was presented with the options of just the 3 options of waiting, or medical management, so taking medication at home, or surgical, a D&C. At that point, I kind of wanted the surgery, but the doctor didn't recommend it. They said that I should try medical first. It was just to balance up risks, I suppose, in her opinion. At the time, she was like, if you're going through IVF, we're trying to be as least invasive as possible. So I had to take the medication. So I went home. We tried medical management. It didn't work. It was a really hard few weeks. I think the worst thing about that time is that you then have to keep testing to make sure your HCG levels go down. Yeah. So for years I had been doing pregnancy tests and hoping for a positive, and all of a sudden I'm doing lots of pregnancy tests, seeing a positive and hoping for a negative. So yeah, the mental side of that was very difficult. Like that, I still had complete positive straight away. They told me to go and buy like the cheapest test, like €1, 150, everything that are like least sensitive, but they were going positive straight away. So I was back in the Rotunda a few weeks later, and we went with D&C then at that point. So that was February of last year, 22. Had the D&C, came out. Physically I was okay afterwards. I kind of recovered pretty quickly. For the first week or so, after a couple of weeks I didn't feel well again. I was getting pains, bleeding returned very heavily. I was kind of still back and forth with Rotunda, giving them updates, which was really tough because at that stage, you know, it was 6-7 weeks after I had found out I had lost the baby, and it just seemed to be dragging on so long. But unfortunately I ended up back in the hospital. There was still tissue inside, so I had an infection. But they also discovered at that point that I actually had this really rare thing, a UVM, so it's a uterine uterine venous malformation or something. So essentially, they're unsure how it developed, but trauma in the womb, a vein and an artery in my uterus had fused together. And that's what was causing the pain, because I was getting these shooting pains kind of down my leg. And it was that they were quite enlarged. So I wasn't allowed to leave the hospital. I wasn't allowed to leave the ward. They literally had me on like bed rest, don't move anywhere. So I was in the rotunda for almost a week, because they had to treat the infection, because they couldn't go in to do the D&C. They couldn't do any surgery. Before, first of all, confirming that that's what I had. There was many scans. I was sent out to have CTs. No one knew what it was at the start. So it took about 4 or 5 days to find out. I was in the rotunda on my own. At that stage, due to like COVID restrictions, there was one person allowed in just at visiting times. So it was very scary, because I had no idea what was going on.
And that's also incredibly difficult to be in a maternity hospital surrounded by people in labour and bumps and...
Yeah, it was hard. I think because I was up and down so much for like scans and that. Obviously, you see everybody who's going around. I was in like the gynecological ward, but still, and like the staff are incredible. I have to say that the nurses, like, they really were, and they really took great care of me, because they knew why I was there. And yeah, at the same time, I was almost kind of scared to go out the door. I was actually there. I remember the weekend I was there was actually the stage where at the end of March. It was Mother's Day, so I remember being in the hospital and thinking, I thought this was going to be my first Mother's Day. Because by that stage I should have been halfway through my pregnancy. And I was like, and I'm still here, like it still isn't over.
No resolution to
it. So yeah, that was really, really hard that day, especially because that's what was in my head. I was like, oh, I thought there was going to be Mother's Day, and like, what am I now? There's a loss of kind of identity, I suppose, at that stage as well. Just, it was very, very tough. And to be in the maternity hospital on that day, it was hard. But when they confirmed what I had, they scheduled me for surgery, so I ended up having to have 2 surgeries on the same day. They wanted to go in and do an embolization, so essentially insert some form of like a foam, so that's how they explained it to me, into the vein, so that to cut off the blood supply. They needed to alleviate the risk there, so that they could go in and do the repeat D&C. And that was all done. I got transferred to Connolly and had that done there. So yeah, overall I was in hospital for over a week, had that, and was discharged then. And a good bit of recovery at that stage. That was really, really hard. I think, as I said from the start, my whole journey was really on a bullet train, and that stopped me in my tracks. Even, I don't think I felt, because there was so much going on, I don't think I felt the full loss until after that stage. And that was April.
Yeah, so that was April last year. And at what point did it hit you, I suppose? And you as a couple, you and your husband, what the last year and a half?
When I came out of hospital, I was kind of forced to rest anyway, physically rest and everything. So I was off work for a few weeks and everything. My parents literally hid my car. They took, because I had driven myself to the rotunda, because I was like, oh, I'll be in and out, and then they kept me. So my car was parked outside. My dad came and collected it and brought it to his house, and I wasn't allowed to have it back. So then basically I had to stay at home. So yeah, was forced to rest. But even then, I had only actually started a new job. I only started a new job, and during that time as well. So I was really had it in my head, I have to get back to work and get back into it. And although I rested physically and I looked after myself physically, I don't think I let it register even at that point. Jumped back into work, and that only lasted a couple of weeks. I would say it was probably May. Things came to kind of a head. it started to show then. I wasn't doing well in myself. But I probably wasn't letting myself feel it at the same time. It was very hard. I was very torn. I felt lost. I didn't trust myself in a way. And I think that's what came from having the miscarriage. I think because I'd reassured myself that everything was okay. And it kind of felt like I had been lying to people and lying to myself in a way, that it wasn't real. Because for estimated 2 weeks, that's what I was telling people, I was pregnant, like I had already lost the pregnancy technically, and so that was really difficult. And I'm definitely the one who kind of pushes us to talk about our feelings, and the driver behind that. So my poor husband, I don't think he knew really what to do.
And at that point, had you had any sort of counselling? Had you linked in with any support groups? No. Yeah.
And it was offered 100%, and it was recommended, of course. Something such as actually, like, the guys here were amazing. Like, throughout that time that I was going through all that, like, I think John called me about 3 times at least in that time himself. Probably because every time he called me, I'm like, no, it's still going on. And like that, he said, really make sure you look after yourself and each other. And of course, everyone said to me, you should go and talk to people. At that point, I remember I think I was still shocked, but also angry. And I kind of thought, well, what are they going to do? Like, they can't help me.
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah, they can't. In my head, I was like, they can't fix what's wrong. And yeah, I just really bottled up at that point. I wasn't, and I was the same at home. So yeah, poor Cathal, he didn't he didn't know what to do. Couldn't speak to me. And it just kind of came to a head where, like, he just sat me down one day and was like, I'm really, really concerned. And I think he had been speaking to my mom as well. And he's like, we need to do something here. And like that, I was kind of like, I was really difficult. I really was. I was just picking fights with him. We struggled a lot at that point. And it was only more so when we started to fight a bit more, I think, that I suddenly went, what's happening here?
Yeah, this isn't
good. Yeah. And so that's, at that point was when we kind of went and sought, we went and sought kind of counselling together.
Great. For
ourselves, like for our relationship at that point, I suppose, but just to work through those things together. And like that, I attended sessions then on my own too.
Yeah.
And it was a help, despite the fact that I said it wasn't going to be, and they can't help. It was. There was just so much, and I think it had built up over so much time. There's kind of a case of, although I was letting people in and telling people about the journey and about the treatments, I was putting on a brave face the whole time. And I think when you have that end goal of, I'm going to get my baby, that's what I'm here for. It's like, even though you get knocked down, you're like, okay, I have to keep going because it's going to be worth it in the end.
Yeah. And so many people go through years and years of this and have that in their head and have that mentality of, you can beat me down and I'm just going to get back up and I'm going to keep going, and you're battered and bruised, and you don't have the time or the space to heal any of that, and you just keep going, and you're getting like bruises on top of wounds, and and then you get to the end of it, and sometimes people are just so broken by it.
Yeah. And I think that's how last summer, that's how I described myself, was broken. I think because it was such a long process physically, in my head, of course, I sat there going, okay, well, now it's like June, July. It's been months since my last treatment. I should go again.
To do it. Yeah.
But I did recognize, I was like, I wanted to go again, but I couldn't. And then my expected due date was coming up as well, the start of August, and that was really hard, and I knew it was coming, and so we just had to stop. And I think it was the best thing for us at the time. We just needed a bit of a break. We needed to look after ourselves and each other, and I needed that space because I was pushing myself too much.
Yeah.
Now all the pressure was coming from me because I wanted to keep going. I had this time limit in my head as well. You know, my grand plan where I was going to have 2 kids before I was 30.
By age this.
Yeah. And I remember saying that in counselling last year, and I was like, I know that's crazy. But when I turned 30 last year, like, it was really difficult.
Yeah, because
really,
in
really
your
hard.
head, you're like, I'm supposed to have 2 kids by now.
Yeah, and I remember when I got pregnant, and everyone was like, "You're going to be pregnant for when you're 30," and I was like, "Yes, that counts."
Yeah.
And I wasn't, because my birthday's in January. So yeah, and it was just, it was very hard. And looking now, I really wish I had kind of gotten a bit more support earlier, but it was offered left, right and center. It was
you weren't ready to.
Yeah. So yeah, having those few months, we had a few months off where we just went to counselling, got ourselves back, and decided to try again. We decided to do ICSI. We went with ICSI, got back into treatment at the end of September of last year, did a round in October, Retrieval, and unfortunately I got no embryos this time. So that was just another hit in a way, because I was like, we had spent time building ourselves back up and we're ready to go.
And it's just such a kick in the face, isn't it? Because especially when you feel like you've put so much time into like yourself, and you've taken the time, and you're coming into it with a much better headspace.
Yeah.
You kind of feel like you deserve it, right?
That's it. I was like, look what I did what I was meant to do.
I know. And that's the thing about fertility treatment, is it's not about if you are deserving of it or if you've worked the hardest. You can be the person who puts in the most effort, let's say.
My favorite thing to do. I'm like, if I work hard enough at it, I'll get what I want.
And it's not, work doesn't equal reward in fertility treatment, which is so hard to kind of grapple with as someone who is used to, in most aspects of our lives, if you work hard, you get what you deserve. And that's just not the case in fertility treatment, which is really hard. It's numbers, and it's chance, and it's percentages, and it's, you know, cumulative success of just trying again.
That's it. And it's very interesting. I think one big thing I've taken from it is just the when you realize just how lucky people are when you do get to have a baby. And it is, it's like, it's amazing when you break it down to be like what the chances actually are, and you have no awareness of it. I think that's one of the biggest surprises, I think, coming into fertility treatment. Like that, it isn't hugely spoken about. It definitely has gotten better, and I've even seen that in the few years I've been involved. I wasn't sure if it was just because I was aware of it, because I was in it, but I do think there's more
it's
of a
definitely getting better in the last couple of years,
which is great. And it is, I am someone who talks about it, and I think I just talk about it normally because I want to normalize it. I have 2 younger sisters. There's big age difference between us. So one's 22, one's 16, so they were very young when I started, and I was honest from the start. And it was more because I thought, like, people should be aware of this. I feel like everyone should, but women, I feel like you should be aware there's this potential. I thought if I normalize it, they might feel it as normal, and they might spread that kind of message too. I know that my friends as well were shocked. I think they've gotten many science lessons from me at this point to learn different things. So, and it's amazing. It is that case that the minute you talk about it, you'll always find someone who's like, oh, me too.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's an awful lot of that with fertility treatment and with pregnancy loss. That's definitely a trickier one to talk about. It's hard. I try to be open with it in a way, because part of me, the logical part of me, is like, this should be spoken about. It should be normalized. I feel like people shouldn't be hiding away. And one of the biggest supports I think that I had was groups actually on social media. it's incredible when you go to look just how many people there are.
Yeah.
And they were probably the biggest support. It's people sharing their stories, and then you don't feel alone, and you feel seen and heard and validated. And I think that's all anyone wants who's going on such a difficult journey that largely is hidden, even when you do share parts of it. Yeah, I think because it's such a consuming process.
It really is. And I think, you know, what you said about sharing the side of pregnancy loss after fertility treatment is so important, because so many people, including those going through it, have this mentality of, if I can just get pregnant, then everything will be fine. And it comes as such a blow and such a shock, and it's almost harder than not being able to get pregnant in the first place.
Yeah, you get like, it's almost like you got a taste of it. It's that's what you were aiming for, and I got it, but then that wasn't it. And it is one of the hardest things. I know, like when I went back and did the next round in October, in my head I was like, okay, no, I'm okay, you know, I've looked after myself, I've been to counselling, I was still doing the counselling and everything, still going at that time, and I was like, no, I'm ready for this. But it was very tough coming back in. I didn't realise how emotional I would be when I came in. I'm pretty sure my first like scan to get checked, I'm pretty sure I cried, and I'm sure they were probably like, it was over nothing. It was literally like, how many follicles have I got? I think it was like day 4 or 5. Like, how many? I was like, oh my God. But yeah, I think at that stage again, I was kind of going, okay, if I can keep going, you know, I've had the hard time. If I can get through this, and then you kind of get another knock, and it is hard. And like you said, once you're in it, a lot of people keep going when they get those knocks, which is very tough, because you're just chipping away at yourself. And I also think there is that case of, and there's nothing wrong with it, but there is that thing of, oh, if you're going through IVF and going through fertility, it's like, oh, you're so strong. So you're like, I have to be strong.
You're like, I'm not strong, but I have no choice.
Yeah, very much so. It is about choice. And although I suppose you choose to go to fertility treatment, it's not and that is me. I always wanted children. I always knew I wanted children. Worked with children all my life, and when me and my husband was first started out, it's 10 years ago now, I remember one of the first things I said to him when he asked me to be his girlfriend was, we were literally 20, 21, and I was like, okay, well, 2 things. I was like, I am going traveling. So, and I was going the following year, so I was like, I'm going with the rest of you, and I'm having children.
So,
and he kind of looked at
get
me.
on board.
And it was literally like, don't waste my time. Okay, so it's non-negotiable. I was like, I've told you now, straight up front, it's non-negotiable. And I was 21 years of age. And I was like, so this won't be a shock to you in a few years. So, and I think because I was so open with it, it was always something we discussed through our relationship. We moved abroad and lived abroad. We came home. And the reason we came home was because we were getting married and I wanted to have my children in Ireland. And that was in 2018. So we were talking, we knew in 2017, 18, right, we'll get married, buy our house, and start then. It was when we first came home. I was living with my parents, so that was the plan.
And I imagine you never, ever thought that you would end up here.
No, no, I didn't. And it's funny, I did know people, like people close to kind of the family. I knew 1 or 2 who had IVF, but again, I didn't really understand what that meant at the time. You know, I was aware, oh, so-and-so had struggled and had IVF and had their baby. And so-and-so was struggled and had IVF and had their baby. In my close family or anything, like my mum, there was there's never been any issues. So yeah, it just wasn't on my radar. And it was funny because I was completely fine with it. I think because I knew what I wanted, and I was like, okay, it's not working, I'm just gonna, this is the next step. And I was comfortable, I was fine with that. It wasn't I wasn't worried about it in the sense of, oh God, I have to go have IVF, or I was happy to, but I had so little knowledge. Even when I thought I knew, I didn't. So yeah, it's definitely been a learning curve.
One question that people often wonder is how you've kind of managed this journey as a couple, and if you feel like it has, well, obviously it's challenged you, but do you feel like it's brought you closer together, or how do you feel this has impacted on your marriage?
It's funny because it's such an important thing, and it's not something we considered. And I think it's because when you go into fertility treatment, I definitely, anyway, I presumed at the start, I kind of thought, I don't know who I thought I was bluffing, but in my head I was like, I'll make the appointments and I'll get pregnant. Or I'll do a round of treatment, it will work, and I'll get pregnant naturally. And I think those stories you hear quite regularly. So I had that in my head. We had no idea how long it was going to go on for. And as I said, it was really only last year that it started to hit. It was very tough, and it really challenged us. It really, really did. I think even just our personalities, I'm very much the caretaker, and I look after things. And that's not to say he doesn't take care of me or look after me. He does.
You're the fixer.
Yes. Yeah. So I think when I was broken, he had no idea what to do, and I was very little help. I didn't tell him what I needed. I couldn't verbalize it. So there was definitely communication breakdown, and we were just butting heads. So it caused a lot of trouble, and I think it was because I was angry, and of course, who are you going to take it out on but the person at home? So when he was trying his best, I was very much just, even when he was trying, I was just kind of saying, oh, do you want, like, he doesn't understand, he doesn't get what I've been through or what I've done, but he was there, and it was probably it was definitely very tough for him, because he just had to watch it happen, and couldn't do anything. So it definitely challenged us, and it did take time, and it took effort, because we hadn't put in time really into each other. We kind of did let that slide, because the focus was always on treatment. It was all consuming because of the way that we both kept going and going. We're definitely closer now. It really, that pause last year, really taking the time to invest in our relationship, invest in each other, and ourselves, it really has paid off. We're much closer, we're much better at communicating, and even around the treatments. We discuss things, even though I thought we discussed things before, but even though we're not as blinkered, I think, and we definitely take things into consideration, looking at how tough things can get. We take more considerations, and we discuss things more, so definitely has helped us at the end. But no, it's not easy, and I think it's going to be like that almost for everyone, because even when you think you know what you're getting into, you don't. There is no exact end date. You don't know. You can hope and hope it's going to be short term, but you don't know. So it is important, I think, to really check in with each other, and to recognize that, if one is struggling, that maybe you do need to hit pause and regroup a little bit. Because at the end of the day, if you keep going, and if we had kept going on that train, there would have been a crash. Yeah, exactly. It would have been a crash. It would have just been us fighting with each other, or not on the same page, not in a happy place, but still trying to do this massive journey.
Yeah.
So it really would have taken a toll.
So in terms of an end date or a goal, obviously we all know what your goal is, but what are the next steps for you two?
So we are going to head into another round in March, do another egg retrieval. Because my 2 cycles were a bit different. So one, obviously I got embryos and one I didn't, for lack of a better word. And John laughed at me when I said it, but it's best 2 out of 3, I guess. That's what I love about him. He's so straight, but I'm so straight. I remember saying that to him the first time I met him. I was like, I know this is going to be difficult. Me telling him his job like 3 years ago now. And I was going, I know it's going to be difficult. I said, but I'm not delicate. And I was like, I would much rather you tell me straight out how it is, because then I can plan and prepare myself, and that's fine.
Well, you picked the right doctor for that, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. I was like, please don't pander to me. I don't need it. It's okay. And I feel like I am that person who, if I have information, I kind of protect myself with that. So yeah, so we are going to jump into another round of ICSI. Hopefully we'll get some embryos. If it's a case that doesn't work out for us, we have already, it was briefly mentioned by John, but we have looked at the possibility of egg donation.
Okay.
So that's the next thing to learn about.
Yeah. A whole other learning curve.
That's it.
Yeah.
We've already looked into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I can't help myself. I must know all things. But yeah, we've got a bit of information on it just to have it as a backup. I think I use that a bit as a comfort.
Yeah.
But
that there are always options, and that's thing.
That's it. Yeah. And I think that's one thing I've definitely learned, that when you think, one avenue is closed to you, there are more.
Yeah.
So I do have comfort in that, even when things haven't worked out. I'm going, okay, but there's actually something else we can try. Yeah. So that's really good. That's really what's helped us. So yeah, that will be the next thing to possibly look into if it doesn't work out. Yeah.
Final question. Is there something that you would tell yourself if you could go back to 2019, Sarah 2019, when you first started trying? Is there something you would say to yourself about this journey that you've been on?
Well, everyone always says to take care of yourself and to make sure you're looking after yourself. And I hope I would listen to myself, because I didn't listen to anybody else. But yeah, I think kind of listening to yourself, feeling your own body, your own moods, is really important. If you need a break, you need a break. It's a very physical, very emotional, very mental journey. Whether it's positive or negative, what you're going through is an awful lot. And I think just really remembering to take those breaks when you need them.
Yeah.
And to let people in. Yeah. So the whole way, like I said, I was very open, and then I closed down. And I think that is the way, almost when things get tough, you do kind of just push people away. But yeah, continue to let people in, let people give you the support. Because they can see it, even if you can't, that you might need some help. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it.
Well, I will be looking forward to following your story and welcoming you back next month.
We're looking forward to it, actually. Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, that the headspace doesn't affect the outcome necessarily, but it does help for you. It helps personally to be in a good headspace. Yeah. It's better to be in a good headspace just for you, regardless of what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, like that. So we took another couple of months this time, and it was just a case we were coming to the end of the year, and again, recognizing, I was like, okay, that was another knock.
Yep.
So let's take a month or two and let's go. So yeah, we're all raring to go now next month.
We will all be rooting for you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for sharing your story. I know it will help other people who are going through the same thing.
I hope so. Thank you.